What's going on, guys? This is Dave Heilman, a.k.a. Dynasty Dorks, and this is the SGPN Fantasy Football Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We're presented to you by WynnBET. WynnBET is now live in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, and Virginia. Don't forget about Tennessee. From boots to same-game parlays to live in-game odds, WynnBET has exactly what you need to win. If you sign up today, you bet $100, you're going to get a $100 free bet at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WynnBET. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WYNNBET. State restrictions apply. We're also brought to you by the SGPN NFL Playoff Challenge. $500 in cash and prizes up for grabs exclusively on the SGPN app. What's going on? It's playoff time. If you're doing fantasy football playoffs, make sure you check out one of our sponsors, Underdog. They got a lot of fun stuff going on. But first, I want to talk to you guys about Derek Carr. And so Derek Carr put out a goodbye letter to Raider Nation today. I got two Chargers fans on the show. And Brad, you're a Derek Carr fan. So let's talk about this for a little bit. And before we get into that, I do want to introduce the guys. My co-host, make sure you follow him at FF Bourbon Dude. Brad, how we doing tonight?
Oh, I'm living the dream and in the humble abode of my parents. It's almost more of a fitting bourbon room than mine is when we normally podcast, but they're upstairs watching some Judge Judy right now. I just laughed at them and said, I'm going to go talk some football. So,
well, Papa Bourbon Dude is living it up over there. JF Hornet, definitely one of my guys. Dynasty Dorks family. How we doing, sir?
Good, my friend. Ready to talk some football. Enjoyed. Thanks for the invite.
First time on the show, John. Definitely one of my favorite follows. Funny guy on TikTok. I saw the squeaky wheel the other day, John. How we doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I appreciate the invite, and I'm thrilled to have a friendly company with Mr. Hornet there. So glad to have another Charger fan on the show.
And where can we find your work?
My DFS content can be found on Fantasy Pros, and my Dynasty content on dynastyleaguefootball.com, or as we call it in the business, DLF. So I'm getting geared up for all kinds of new content on the prospects coming in and some other movers and shakers from a Dynasty perspective. So all that will be coming live soon.
And so, again, back to Derek Carr. I put an article out today. Make sure you check it out, sportslandpodcast.com. Put out my favorite landing spots as well as what the current odds are. The current odds currently have the Jets as the top place. They have Indianapolis, Tennessee as some of the higher locations. Brad, if you had to pick one spot, where do you think he would go?
Yeah, where I think he would want to go, because he's got that no trade clause, is going to be somewhere that he believes could be a contender. There are two of those teams, I think, that are looking for a quarterback that may be willing to go the veteran route. And that's going to be either the Washington Commanders or my personal favorite and the New York Gangrene Jets. I think him with Garrett Wilson and him with Tyler Conklin, with the running game of Breece Hall and the way that Robert Saleh and LaFleur are running that offense would really be fitting for Derek Carr. They wouldn't rely on him the way that kind of Las Vegas may have. So I think it's a better situation for him and a better coaching staff to end up in a green and white jersey next season.
Justin, who do you got?
I think the Carolina Panthers might make a splash. David Tepper is already told everyone that he wants to spend plenty of money, and he's got plenty of money. And so I think he's really going to try to turn that organization around. They're going to get a new coach in this year. I don't know that they'll keep the interim that they had. And that's a roster that's already put together for, if you get someone like Derek Carr in, you could probably turn it around really quickly. Picking in the first round at 9th pick is not going to give them anybody in that top 3 range, the Strouds or the Bryce Young's. So I think moving that pick for Derek Carr could be pretty solid.
Yeah, and the compensation is going to be interesting. We saw Russell Wilson moved to a couple, it took a lot of draft picks and some players. You saw Matthew Stafford move. That was 2 first-round picks and Jared Goff. And We saw Carson Wentz moved a couple years ago back when he was with Philadelphia. He was moved for it was 2 second-round picks. One of them was a pick that could be conditional pick that could turn into a first-round pick, and so it did turn into a first-round pick based on his playing time. I think that's probably more the realistic, maybe 2 seconds, one of them being a conditional one. But we'll see. I mean, if you get Derek Carr for the 9th pick, you are going to have to pay him, and if the Raiders do not move him before the 3rd day after the Super Bowl, they're going to be on the hook for his $32.5 million in 2023 plus $7.5 million in 2024 becomes guaranteed on the 3rd day. It's February 15th. So, John, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm kind of following consensus on this. I really think that the Jets are in a position on both sides of the football to make a run. It feels like they're a quarterback away, and if you get a veteran presence, you're not trying to groom a rookie while wasting, some of these guys' years in the league. You got a defense that's primed and ready to go. I think that makes the most sense, and I think if he moves from the Raiders, I think he wants to be a contender immediately, and I think the Jets are a good place for that to happen.
Yeah, and I talked to Justin earlier. The reason I think he goes to the NFC is to get away from all these good quarterbacks. You got Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, you got Joe Burrow, you got a lot of, Trevor Lawrence is up and coming. He's got, Justin pointed out, Calvin Ridley coming next year, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it's hard to be a contender in the AFC. It's pretty easy to be a contender in the NFC South. If you can get 500, you might win the league. And so the Saints are an option. Carolina's an option. Tampa Bay is an option if Brady leaves. Maybe they trade places. But I think the Atlanta Falcons would be very interesting. They have the 3rd most cap next year, and so they have plenty of money to spend. They almost went and traded for Deshaun Watson last year. Kyle Pitts is on the team. You have Drake London there. They obviously have to put together the offensive line, but I think this team is going in the right direction. I would like someone better than Arthur Smith there, but I do like the weapons there, and he plays in a dome and it plays against some really bad defenses in the NFC South versus some of the other places where he has to play outside against some tough competition. So let's get into some awards. We have 4 categories per position, and the first category for quarterbacks. We're going to start off with the negatives. We're going to go with the biggest bust. And we have some nominations that the guys in the bottom of my screen may not like. Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr. Ralph, he could not be here tonight. We had the internet guy came in, set up the new internet, the new house, and did a bad job. So RIP Ralph, but we'll see you next time. And then Justin Herbert again. That makes Justin Herbert the winner, and that's not a good thing you want to win. John, why'd you nominate Justin Herbert?
I play a lot of Superflex. I took a lot of Justin Herbert for reasons, unrelated to my homerism, and I felt the pain that everybody else that drafted him high had to feel. There was one league in particular where I had the 3rd pick in the first round, and I took him right there in a super flex. I went right after him. I'm like, I get to be a homer and watch my guy. And after week 1, I'm like, yes. And then week 2, after the rib injury in week 2, he fell outside the top 15 in weekly scoring 7 times this season. 7 times. And he finished with a career low 147 rushing yards. He didn't score a rushing touchdown. First time in his career, he hasn't done that. He did not live up to the top 5 positional ranking, which really hurts to say as a Chargers fan, but truth is truth.
Yeah, no, I you were the first one to nominate him, and I think Justin might have also put his name. Yeah, you guys are both people that voted for Justin. So there was a little personal. There might have been a little personal on that, but no, I cannot disagree. Justin Herbert was someone that, in your redraft leagues, even your 1 quarterback leagues, you had to pay up a little bit to get Justin Herbert. You weren't getting him in the 10th, 11th, 12th round. You were giving up very good draft capital for a guy that just did not perform. So let's go from the bust to the values. Here's the guys that nobody wanted anything to do with in August, and that's Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, Jared Goff, Geno Smith again, Kirk Cousins. And the winner is Geno Smith. John, why does Geno Smith win the best value?
Yeah, he came out and nobody had any expectations. We were all waiting, like how long is it going to be before we see I forgot his name.
Drew Lock.
Drew Lock, thank you. Before we see the Drew Lock experiment in Seattle, and he came out week 1 and played solid. And he's always been a solid fill-in, but that's it. And we saw a lot of consistency. Did he finish the season leading the league in completion percentage?
He did.
I know he led that for most of the season. So that from career backup to that has been, he could have been plucked off the waiver wire. He wasn't high on draft boards, and he finished in a very respectable spot when no one had any expectations for it.
I'm still waiting for the apology from the U.S. Open to the Seattle Seahawks. Just putting that out there. U.S. Open, you need to give the Seahawks an apology. And Geno would have said that in his acceptance speech of this award. Waiver wire winner. We got Brock, Mrs. Purdy, Daniel Jones, Brock Purdy again, Geno Smith. So this is a shared award between Geno Smith and Brock Purdy. I'm just going to finish up talking about Geno Smith, and I'm going to pivot to Brad for Brock Purdy. With Geno Smith, he was drafted as QB 30, 260 as far as ADP in your one quarterback leagues, and he finished as the QB 5. And he did this on the back of very consistent performances. He was a top 20 quarterback 17 out of the 18 weeks, and that includes the week 18 where I know we shouldn't be in championships, but this was a weird year, and some people really needed some points that week. He was top 7 6 times. We didn't think that Geno had that kind of a ceiling. We didn't really think this offense was going to have that kind of a ceiling. And other players really benefited from the fact that Geno Smith played well. So you got values from DK Metcalf. You got values from the running backs, Rashad Penny and Ken Walker. You got values from Tyler Lockett that you did not expect to get in return. So not only did Geno Smith win this award from his own performances, but he lifted people up. Brad, let's talk about Brock Purdy, Mrs. John Harbaugh Jr.
Yeah, so the first thing is all about consistency, right? So this guy come in as Mr. Relevant, the third string quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, and comes in, and Dave, you and I have talked about it, 202. Just lock it in. 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. Oh, you know what? Week 18, he didn't get 200 yards. Oh, but he threw 3 touchdowns instead of 2 touchdowns. Like, the dude is just lockstep. And the biggest reason that I think, not only on top of that he is the waiver wire darling of the year for the quarterback position, is you really didn't see any devaluation of any of the other offensive players on the team. So typically when you see that backup or that third string, you see all those other offensive players fall off the mat, right? Christian McCaffrey, oh my God, what are we going to worry about him? Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, who ended up being hurt, can't really count him. George Kittle, oh my God, all these guys down. George Kittle goes on a touchdown streak, 5 weeks in a row he scored a touchdown, right? Christian McCaffrey continues to crush it. Elijah Mitchell comes in this past week and scores 2 rushing touchdowns. The whole offense is clicking. Whether you want to blame that on Brock Purdy or whether you want to blame that on Kyle Shanahan, it doesn't matter. The simple fact is if you were able to get Brock Purdy off the waiver wire, you were pretty happy with him as well as all the other offensive players on the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, just a dynasty question for you, Justin. What are you doing right now with Trey Lance? With how well if Brock Purdy goes and takes him, let's say he takes him to the Super Bowl. They may not win it, but if he gets them to the Super Bowl, what are you doing with Trey Lance this offseason?
I think at this point you got to hold. Most people either sold the farm in Dynasty to potentially get first-round picks up there to where you could draft Trey Lance, and so you probably gave up a bunch, or your team was so bad that you picked him early and you were hoping he turned you around, and now his value is floored. So I think you've got to hold on right now and just hope that, I don't know, they send Brock Purdy back to a backup status and look at Trey Lance as the guy that they gave 3 first-round picks to get.
Yeah, the footballers talked about it and said, they compared it to Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. And I don't know if it's the best comparison because Carson Wentz was playing really well before he got hurt and Trey Lance hasn't done anything yet. And then Nick Foles signed a contract with the team. They can keep Brock Purdy and they can roll. His contract he's $3 million over 5 years. Like they could roll with this super cheap quarterback and maybe trade Lance to somebody else. I mean, there's a lot of things they could do. And of course, there are people talking about Brady going over there or Aaron Rodgers going over there, and none of those quarterbacks matter. But it's going to be very interesting. I've seen some Trey Lance trades already, so I know people are getting a little nervous. Let's talk about Mr. Consistency before we finish out the quarterbacks. And to just define consistency, I mean, that's a player that's going to show up every single week. You put him in your lineup, and you don't have to worry about it every single week. We had Kirk Cousins, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, and the winner, Mr. Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes was a QB1 every single week. His worst performances were QB 11 and QB 12. He got QB 13 when he played half the game on week 18. He was top 3 5 times. He was top 6 12 times. And he offered a little bit of rushing this year with 3 rushing touchdowns. And he had, a couple hundred yards on the ground. Some people were concerned with Tyreek Hill leaving, with some of these, oddball pieces coming in like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And we'll see what happens with Juju. And they're going to get Sky Moore out of what, it worked. It worked. And he didn't really need any of those other guys. It was the same thing. It was Kelsey and Kelsey and Kelsey every single week. But Mahomes and Reed are just awesome, fun to watch. And everyone who saw that reindeer formation, it looked like the annexation of Puerto Rico. I mean, they're having fun out there. Sorry, so much love from Mahomes from the Chargers guys. Let's move on to the running backs. But before we do that, this show is sponsored by WynnBET. WynnBET is the official online sportsbook of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. WynnBET is active in a bunch of states, and there are a ton of ways to win, including live betting and same-game parlays. The NFL playoffs are here. Great promos, odds, and payouts are happening right now at WynnBET. Ready to play? You sign up today, and you receive a special offer. If you bet $100, you're going to get a $100 free bet, limited to state availability. There's so much to choose from. All you have to do is head over to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WynnBET. That's so they know we sent you. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WYNNBET. You have offer subject to change, terms and conditions at WynnBET.com. Must be 21 or older and present in a state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call 1-800-522-4700. And don't forget about the SGPN NFL Playoff Challenge. SGPN has teamed up with Homage for the NFL Playoff Challenge. Homage makes all those cool throwback NBA Jam shirts and things like that. The winner will get $300 cash and a $100 SGPN gift card and a Homage $1-800 gift card. Homage has a ton of cool retro and throwback officially licensed NFL gear. I think I saw some Tecmo Bowl stuff on there, John. Check them out on sportsgamblingpodcast.com/homage for all the contest details, and enter and download the SGPN app and hit free contest. Let's go to the running backs. And this was a good year for running backs, but it wasn't as good of a year for running backs drafted early. And so the bust. This, I know I throw the tweets out there, and a lot of people have different definitions of bust. My definition of bust is someone that has been drafted high. You cannot be someone that's drafted in the 7th or 8th round. You have to have played at least half the season. I'm not going to put Javonte Williams on this list because he got hurt, didn't have the opportunity to play. And Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift. Jonathan Taylor's the winner. And Jonathan Taylor was the number 1 overall pick in a lot of your leagues. John, why is he the biggest bust?
Yeah, it's all about draft capital. Draft capital is so big. When you've got that first round pick, you want to use it properly. You want to maximize the points out of it. And we're talking about Jonathan Taylor that went first or second in a lot of leagues, and he did so on the back of a RB6 performance in 2020, an RB1 performance in 2021. Enter this year, and he finished as the RB32. He was an RB4 or worse in 36% of his games. That's ridiculous. Now, he did struggle with injury. We're aware of that. And that O-line couldn't block a spam call, much less a stacked box. So they weren't doing him any favors whatsoever.
Likely.
Yeah, for reals. So, and he had the opportunity. That was the biggest thing, is the opportunity was there. He averaged 19.2 rush attempts per game. Pretty darn good. But behind that O-line and between that and dealing with injury, he just failed to be anywhere close to where you're drafted. We're talking a 2-tier drop from where you drafted him. That makes him a bust.
Yeah, I got to interview fantasy football writer, Hall of Famer Greg Kellogg this summer, and he talked about the curse of 370, and he said, don't draft Jonathan Taylor. Don't do it. And he just went through all of the reasons why not to, going back the last 15 years of all the running backs that have had 370 plus touches. And he was like, I'll take Christian McCaffrey. I'll take a receiver. I'm not touching him. I'm not touching Najee Harris. And he's like, I'll tell you right now, I haven't even watched football in 2 years. But this history is going to tell you the future. And he was right. He was right. It was ugly out there, and then he got hurt, and now he may have to have surgery on that. Justin, Bijan Robinson or Jonathan Taylor? Who are you taking first in the startup?
I haven't read up enough on Jonathan Taylor's injury to know how serious it is. I think I'm still taking Jonathan Taylor.
The only reason I would take Bijan is because I know I can trade Bijan for Jonathan Taylor plus. I've done all the polls, and I was actually going back and forth with DLF today, and they had a poll out there, and yeah, like Jonathan Taylor for Saquon Barkley, it's like 85%. Bijan Robinson for Saquon Barkley, it's like 85% Bijan. So you just get Bijan and trade him for whoever you want plus as far as running backs. He is the number one running back asset, and I do my rankings based on their trade value. And so for me, he is the RB1 in Dynasty. He's not above all the receivers or all the superflex quarterbacks, but his value is insane. Speaking of value, best value, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Jamal Williams, Miles Sanders. And this was close. It actually goes to Josh Jacobs. And so one of these got changed. It was supposed to be Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard. So Josh Jacobs is the winner. John, why is he the best value?
Yeah, again, I mean, draft value, like where you come in. So Jacobs somehow landed on the running back naughty list prior to draft season. The ridiculous preseason usage just added, fire to that. Drove his ADP down. He was like, a late third, early fourth round pick in most leagues. And
ADP was 47.
Yeah. So right there in that range. And he answered by rushing for the most yards in the NFL, the most yards of his career, scoring double-digit touchdowns for the second time in his career. Oh, and he did all of that at the highest yards per carry average of his career. The stuff studs are made of, and you love to see that kind of return on investment for, a fourth-round pick.
Yeah, and an honorable mention to a few different guys. Honorable mention to Tyler Algier, 106 draft capital. Kenneth Walker, 94. Ramondre Stevenson, 76. Tony Pollard, 70. You can get Tony Pollard or Chase Edmonds. Yeah, that's something you might regret. Let's go to the next award, and this is the waiver wire winner. Remember, not all your leagues are the same. Some leagues are 10 teams, some are 16, some have short benches, long benches. And some of these guys were drafted, but then they were dropped. And so waiver wire winner nominations, Zach Moss, Jamal Williams, Jerick McKinnon. And this is a combination of Jamal Williams and Jerick McKinnon sharing the award. Brad, let's talk about Jamal Williams and Jerick McKinnon.
I mean, 17 touchdowns 17 touchdowns for a guy that everyone thought was going to be the backup running back in Detroit. I mean, DeAndre Swift had less than 50% of carries greater than 50% of carries in like 5 games. That's pathetic, right? Jamal Williams came in and dominated at the red zone. The team rallies around the guy, and when he can come in there and score 17 touchdowns, it just makes sense, right? Who thought that a waiver wire guy is going to give you more than, we'll say, 5 to 7 touchdowns? And this dude led the league in touchdowns. It's disgusting, right? Same thing when you look at Jerick McKinnon, at least over the last 5 or 6 games. This guy's got like 9 touchdowns in the last 6 games. It's just ridiculous that the path that he's on or has been on in his career, he ends up in Kansas City. He doesn't do really anything the first half of the season. He's got a couple kind of blow-up games in the middle of the season, and people going, hey, you know what, let me drop 2 touchdowns. Boom, another touchdown. 2 touchdowns. Like just another guy who's just throwing the touchdowns off when you need him in the playoff season, in championship week, in that last week. You need a win. You pick up Jerick McKinnon, you get that win in week 14, it gets you into the playoffs, and then you just ride him to that championship. I watched somebody do it. It was the most irritating thing in the world because his team sucked. And he won because of Jerick McKinnon. So it's crazy to think that somebody like that is out there, right? That can just take your team to the next level in the playoffs. You use him for 6 weeks and you sell him for anything you can get, or hell, who knows? He may be dropped, right, in dynasty leagues moving forward, depending on what the Kansas City Chiefs decide to do with him. So when you look at guys who can get that touchdown production from you, that's really what you're looking for, right, is the consistency in the touchdowns, and that happened for both of these guys throughout the season.
Yeah, I think there's a lot you can learn from both of these, situations. You want running backs on good offenses. And so I'm not telling everyone they need to go 0 RB, but if you're stacking up running back depth at the end, you're looking at guys that are going to be on good offenses. I think not many people predicted the Lions to be a good offense, but you could at least predicted me a bad defense. And so, and you could also predict DeAndre Swift would get injured at some point, which he didn't really get hurt, but he was the backup. And at sometimes he was the 3rd string running back on that team. Super odd, super frustrating. We'll see what happens with Swift next year. I think we're all hoping he gets traded or something, but Jamal Williams is a free agent next year. We'll see if they bring him back. He seems like a guy they would bring back. And they got some money to do so, but Swift will be on the last year of his contract next year, I believe. The last award for the running backs is Mr. Consistency. And there's a lot of people that could have been in this. And we had some really, really consistent running backs in for a few of these guys. But Christian McCaffrey, he switched teams and he dominated his first full game with the Niners. He had literally had a passing, running, and a receiving touchdown. Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, and Austin Eckler is the award winner. Justin, let's talk about Austin Eckler. I traded him to you. I feel bad about it now. Why is Austin Eckler miss consistency?
Well, I mean, the last 2 years he's putting up 18 touchdowns and 20 touchdowns and 18 touchdowns this year. So I mean, he's been that guy in the red zone, and that was the knock on him for a long time, right? He was always the guy that was going to get good reception totals. He didn't really run too much between the 20s because Melvin Gordon did that early on in his career, and he didn't get the goal line carries. But lo and behold, Melvin Gordon leaves. Austin Eckler takes that, and he's pound for pound one of the strongest running backs in the league. And so he took care of business. And so the consistency is always going to be there in PPR from the receptions. And when he's getting touchdowns like that, he's going to be in the top 4 running backs year after year.
Yeah. If he was just a receiver, he would have been our wide receiver 20. He had 107 catches, 722 yards receiving, and 5 touchdowns receiving. That's just his receiving numbers. But overall, he was a top 5 player 10 times, top 24 running back. He was 100% of the time. He was a top 24 running back. He was top 5 10 times for running backs. He had 4+ receptions in 16 to 17 games and 7+ receptions in 8 games. This guy just absolutely tore it up. He had beginning of the season, he had started off a little bit, quote unquote, slow, but I mean, he was locked and loaded stud every single week the rest of the week, and I regretted trading him every single one of them.
I think when I looked at it, he's the only running back that did not give you not 1 week did he give you a single-digit fantasy production week. He's the only running back that did it. Like, that's ridiculous. That is the model of consistency. It's nuts.
Well, some guy just said, "Get off my lawn. I play in a standard league," and he did it. But
that's fair. That's fair.
And I'm playing any standard league, so I don't know if that's true. But
yeah,
I figured maybe in a standard league is the only way it's possible.
That is possible. Yeah,
but that's a great stat, Brad, because I didn't know that. Biggest bust for the receivers: Allen Robinson, Elijah Moore, Gabe Davis. If you listen to Fantasy Footballers, Allen Robinson won the award last year, and he was up for the Poopiest Pants Award again this year. This is our version of the Poopiest Pants Award, and the winner is Allen Robinson. Brad, this is your guy, but I'm gonna let Justin talk about Allen Robinson.
Yeah, so I mean, everybody saw the videos, right, during spring training, or for spring training. I got baseball in the mind now. During the preseason, Allen Robinson catching touchdowns from Matt Stafford throwing no looks to Allen Robinson. And then we got into the season, and lo and behold, that offense didn't change. It was still funneling the ball through Cooper Kupp. It didn't look like Allen Robinson really integrated into the offense at all. In the 10 games he played, he only averaged 3.3 receptions and 33 yards per game. It's just not something that is sustainable in fantasy, and he still was drafted mostly in the 5th, 6th, 7th round this year. So huge bust once again. Hate to be a back-to-back winner.
Yeah, Brad, anything to add?
I'm just gonna drive the bus and then get out of the bus and park myself under the tires and then ask somebody to drive it over me, because I wrote a bold takes article before the season, right? And everybody knows bold takes are not most likely going to happen, right? But I saw a world where this dude could be an absolute stud. And I said, hey, I would recommend, at the price that you can get Allen Robinson right now, because at the time it was fairly cheap from a dynasty perspective because of age and the name and the team change and everything. And so you need to go get this guy. And I pray that nobody listened to me, because if they did, they don't listen to me anymore. He just completely embarrassed a lot of people who had a little bit of faith in, hey, look, this guy needs a scenery change. He needs to get out of Chicago, and he did. And lo and behold, he goes to Matthew Stafford and the Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams and just lays a shit sandwich. It was terrible. And I'm sorry if anybody listened to me. So,
yeah, Allen Robinson was drafted 53rd overall as far as the ADP. So, middle of the 5th round. That's pretty pricey, and you definitely did not get that return. After week 14, Allen Robinson was wide receiver 85. I don't know, wide receiver 60. After week 17, he was wide receiver 80.
Dave, dude, you're just digging now. Like, let's go, man.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one. I'm sure you can find someone that I missed on, Brad, and we can go on that soon. Best value. There was so much value looking at the receivers, so I'm gonna have to do some honorable mentions here. But T. Higgins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Lockett, Christian Kirk, and the winner is going to be Christian Kirk. Justin, let's talk about him.
Yeah, so it was everybody's contract punching bag, right, at the beginning of the season. Everybody's laughing at the Jacksonville Jaguars for throwing 4 years, $72 million at a guy who really had done next to nothing. He finally came in as the wide receiver 3 kind of last year for the Cardinals when they moved into the slot. He was drafted this year, wide receiver 39, 100th overall on average on ADP for PPR. That's the 8th or 9th round. He finished at wide receiver 14, went over 1,000 yards receiving, 78 receptions, and 7 touchdowns. So he was a guy that was their go-to in an offense that was ascending that, we all weren't sure what would happen. And anybody that jumped on him late reaped the rewards.
Yeah, there's a lot of people on here. Zay Jones was drafted at 181. You had DJ Chark was 165, really came on at the end of the year. Garrett Wilson, 164. The don't draft rookie receivers thing, like we stopped doing that 3 years ago. So if you're a redrafter and you're listening, don't worry, you're allowed to draft rookie receivers now. It's a new age NFL. We had Jahan Dotson at 153. We had George Pickens at 123. Tyler Lockett at 112. Finished as the wide receiver 10 after 14 weeks. Didn't play for a week and still finished as wide receiver 13 overall. And with Lockett, I just need to, like, I was a Lockett guy. Then I stopped being a Lockett guy because I was so sick of the up and down. I'm like, at the end of the year, this guy's a wide receiver 1, and he's only a wide receiver 1 3 times every year. And he's a wide receiver 6 the rest. Well, this year he was absolutely different, and so I got to throw him some love. And there was some other good value, with the wide receiver position. Amari Cooper at 84, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 72. Just tremendous value that these guys were guys that you got in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round, and you can start them every week. Waiver wire winner, again, every league is different, but these guys could have been drafted and dropped or just not drafted at all. Donovan Peoples-Jones, Zay Jones, Isaiah Hodgins, love that. Donovan Peoples-Jones, George Pickens, DPJ is the winner. Justin, let's talk about him.
Yeah, so he finished the year at wide receiver 36. For a guy that no one really was talking about in the beginning of the year, you maybe thought he would do something when Deshaun Watson came in week 13. You weren't really relying on anything with Jacoby Brissett. From week 6 to week 15 on a 9-week stretch, now there was a bye week in there, he averaged wide receiver 33. So he was a wide receiver 3 that you got for free. I think that screams waiver wire darling. And for anybody who jumped on it, you got somebody consistent.
Yeah. Brad, anything to add?
No, I love it. I'm a Browns fan, for those of you who may not know. If you listen to the show, I'm sure you already do, because there's always a homer pick in there. And DPJ's my boy. He seems like he's that red zone guy for Deshaun Watson. When they're inside the 10, they like those plays to DPJ, and he scored a decent number of touchdowns for them. So I look for him to do more of the same next year. Fingers crossed, anyway, as a Browns fan. So,
John, some of these receivers, I know you nominated a couple different guys. 2 of the guys you nominated won awards. Anyone you want to talk to out of that bunch, out of those 4?
No, I did. I was definitely in on Donovan Peoples-Jones. I love that. Not a world beater, but when you can get a guy for free and he's going to give you wide receiver 3 or better production in 53% of his games, sign me up. I love it.
And you had CeeDee Lamb on there for Mr. Consistency. CeeDee Lamb, a lot of people had him on their breakout list, including myself. I had Michael F. Florio on the show, and I said, CeeDee Lamb's going to be a top 5 receiver this year. And I looked at my rankings. I had him at wide receiver 6. So I had to adjust my rankings real quick. But CeeDee Lamb was pretty consistent. Anything on him?
Yeah, I was big on him heading into the season, and I've ended up on a few different podcasts as a guest during the course of the season. It feels like every time I get on one, I'm obligated to talk about CeeDee Lamb, and I'm completely okay with that. He finished as a wide receiver 2 or better in 64% of his games. You got to love that consistency when you know you've got that chance for that. He went from the wide receiver 23 in 2020, wide receiver 20 in 2021. He finished this year as the wide receiver 6. I love it. I think he's got a bright future. And he was one of the more consistent people that you could plug in, and you still got him a little cheaper than where he finished. So I like that consistency from that high of a pick.
And you like T. Higgins as a value. Anything on T. Higgins before we move to the tight ends?
Yeah, Higgins was great. I like Higgins a lot, and I was higher than the market on him. And the reason I was higher than the market on him is not just because he's a baller, which he is. It's because he's got an aggressive thrower of the football at the helm. Now, when you have that, an opportunity created by defenses trying to take away Jamar Chase, he's going to be the next look, and he's going to be open, or he's going to get a rifle shot in between two guys, which we saw quite a bit this season. So he averaged 15.8 per game points per game this season, finished as a wide receiver 2 or better in 56% of his games. I love that. He finishes the wide receiver 13 on a points per game average. So the consistency, the value, it was all there, and all teams had to do was take a second look at Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins is getting the rifle shot.
Yeah, and a lot of expert lists, he is a top 10 or top 12 dynasty asset at the receiver position. But he's someone that I feel like you can always get cheaper in your startups and cheaper in trades because people see him as the 2. And, there's always an offense out there that has 2 top 10 options. And, we've seen it before with, the Vikings, or we've seen it before with some of the other teams. And right now it is the Bengals. And I'm excited to watch them play this weekend. Let's move on to the tight end position.
Are we skipping JJ?
Oh, we're skipping JJ. We are skipping JJ. I
can be quick.
I went straight to it. Mr. Consistency. And he's I got him as the photo on our YouTube thumbnail is JJ and a crown and a belt, holding a trophy. Mr. Consistency, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs. The winner, Justin Jefferson. Round of applause because this guy had an absolute awesome season. It sucked in the championship. Ralph made to put that in his vote. But let's talk about Justin Jefferson, Justin.
Yeah, so obviously monster. We don't have to spend too much time on Justin Jefferson. Everybody knows he's an absolute stud. The stats that I wanted to point out that are just amazing. He's a guy that averaged 11 targets a game this year. That is just, write it down, stamp it. He's going to be your number 1 guy every year. And then 48 receptions over 20-plus yards. That's just big play written all over it. 6 out of the last 9 weeks of the season. He did have a down championship game if you were a Week 17 league. But he went 6 of those 9 weeks. He was in the top 4 finishing wide receivers. That's what ballers do, and that's what JJ is.
Yeah, no, I love it. And, he was someone that if you made the decision to draft Justin Jefferson over Jonathan Taylor, that probably won you your league, or at least got you into the playoffs, because that decision was it started your draft off right. Let's go to the tight ends, and we're going with the bus. And we had Mark Andrews, let a lot of people down. He's got a pretty strong resume for this award. Kyle Pitts, voted by me, by Brad, by Ralph, and Darren Waller also made the list. Kyle Pitts is the winner. My cousin Jason will be disappointed. He was very annoyed by my thread on how many people were talking crap about Kyle Pitts. But he won the award, and it's deserving. We talked about not, hating on players for injury reasons. But Kyle Pitts played in 11 games. And when you play in 11 games, we're expecting you to have at least 5 or 6 good games, right? That's half. And it just didn't happen. 5.9 points, 5.9 points, 18.7 points. Okay, we finally got something. 4.5 points, 13.9 points, 6.9 points. At this point, you're thinking, I might sit this guy. Well, hope you didn't, because he got 24 points. Now you're feeling really good. And then 6.7, 6.8, finished it with 10.3. And this is in PPR. This is a guy that the dynasty community, let's be honest, has put way too high of expectations. I said earlier, it's okay to draft rookie receivers. It's not okay to draft rookie tight ends. It's not okay. Don't let friends do that. It's just not, they're not there yet. We talked about, the tight end position is one of the most difficult positions to transfer to. They have to go to the offensive line meetings. They got to go to the receiver meetings. a lot of these tight ends, they had never even been in a 3-point stance in college unless they played at Iowa. It's a very difficult position to transfer. And we saw some decent production this year, right? Dulcich, you had Chig, you had Bellinger, but we haven't really seen even guys like Hawkinson and Noah Fant and OJ Howard that were drafted super early. Evan Ingram is the exception to the rule, but I mean, Evan Ingram fell into 116 targets. The Giants, Brandon Marshall was on the Giants, by the way. Yeah, if you remember that. Brandon Marshall, Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, all were out for the season, all injured against these guys' Chargers, week 3. And I forget the name of the guy now, but Bowling Green receiver was our one the rest of the year, and then Evan Ingram. It just doesn't happen for rookie tight ends. And so Kyle Pitts this year, I do blame a lot of it on Mariota and Arthur Smith, but we have to see better production out of him. And hopefully the draft capital next year is decent, but people took him as the 3rd or 4th tight end, and it was a major letdown. Best value. This was a unanimous selection for Evan Ingram. As we just talk about it, Evan Ingram was an absolute stud to finish the season. He was pretty good throughout the season, and he may have been dropped in a few leagues and picked back up. He was someone that a lot of people saw the Doug Peterson connection and thought Evan Ingram would be a good selection this year. It didn't start out that way, but it sure finished. Anybody want to throw in anything on Evan Ingram?
So, shameless plug for myself here. I thought Evan Ingram was a solid pick at tight end this year, only because I thought that Doug Peterson's offense has always been pretty good at highlighting the tight end from a fantasy perspective. So I was glad to see that come to fruition. Not that I thought he was going to do as well as he did, because it's Evan Ingram. You thought he'd get a case of the dropsies or something like that. But I think any tight end in the Doug Peterson offense, everyone in fantasy should take notice of and stash him.
Yeah, he's a free agent next year. We'll see if they tag him or bring him back. But it'll be interesting to see how he does with the addition of Calvin Ridley in that offense and see what they do with Zay Jones. I think Zay Jones is still under contract there, but I double-check that. But I know Evan Ingram has signed a 1-year deal.
Yeah, as good as he played, because we are a dynasty pod, as good as he played, I still think you have to try to move him as quickly as possible right now before everybody starts to think about the Calvin Ridley effect and, okay, well, what do they do with Zay Jones? What if they draft a young tight end? Like, all these variables are going to start to come to play later on in the offseason. If you can move Evan Ingram for really probably anything at a 29-year-old tight end is probably, who has no contract right now, it might be the time to do that.
Ingram is he'll be there next year. I mean, he'll be a free agent next year, but Zay Jones will not. He's on a 3-year contract, essentially a 2-year with a team option, so they can get out of it after 2024. But the way he's playing, if he continues that, he'll definitely be back on the team in 2024. But he'll at least be there next year. Let's move on to the waiver wire winner. Again, another unanimous selection, Juwan Johnson from the Saints. I thought about putting Taysom Hill on here, but we all went with Juwan Johnson, and I think he was a pleasant surprise. We were not expecting it. We saw a little bit of some spark from him last year, but he really came on, and he had some big performances. I saw he had as many top 5 performances as everyone except for Kelsey. I think he was number 2 in top 5 performances. Kelsey's just in a whole nother world. Anything on Juwan Johnson and his outlook in 2023?
I mean, he's skinny Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron had that one big year and then, was just kind of serviceable. I don't see him duplicating that kind of production. I don't see him going on a multi-game stretch of 2 touchdowns a game again. If it's hard to cash out on someone that never really caught fire because he was still available on waiver wires in so many redraft leagues this year. even after the performances he had. So I'm not getting my hopes up. We don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be. We don't know what the wide receiver situation is going to be. There's not enough there for me to want to be too heavily invested in one of these high touchdown only guys. So yeah, he was fun to watch, but don't bank on anything for next season for it.
What do you think, Brad? With someone, if you have Juwan Johnson on your team, you're trying to get a third for him. Is that all right?
If I can get if it's a 3-round rookie, I'm going to take anything 3rd round and above. If I've got a 4th, if you have a 4th round, if somebody's offering a 4th, I'm going to keep him at that cost just because you just don't know. And 4th round rookie draft picks aren't worth anything, right? But if I can get a 3rd, there's Isaiah Pacheco was drafted in the 3rd round, right? So there are some 3rd round picks that could still hit from a dynasty perspective. So I'll take a 3rd for him, but if it's 4th, I'm passing. I'll hold him for that.
Justin, anything? All right, the next award is Mr. Consistency, and we finally got on the same page here with tight ends. We did not agree on much until the tight ends. But Mr. Consistency was Travis Kelce, and so Travis Kelce, I looked it up earlier. He's a cheat code, and so Travis Kelce, if he were a wide receiver, would have been the wide receiver 4 this season. If he were a running back, then he would be running back 4. It was Eckler, McCaffrey, Jacobs, Kelce, and then Derrick Henry. And he had 25 more, or you have 17 more points than Henry. Wide receivers, Jefferson, Hill, Adams, Kelce, and then Diggs. He had about 9 more points than Diggs. I mean, this guy was just unbelievable all year. Mr. Consistency, Mr. Reliable, but he also had the absolute ceiling that you just – if I have Travis Kelce and Brad is rolling out, pretty much anybody else, I won that position that week. And it was just a total X factor in your leagues, especially your tight end premium leagues.
He could have single-handedly, what was it? It was like week 5 or 6. He had a 3-touchdown game, put up like 40-something fantasy. Like that alone would win you a week. Like
I don't need
from
you to
the tight end position. Like just get out of here with that,
Yeah, and so Travis Kelce, because of his age, is an interesting player in Dynasty. And I was writing a tight end sell article, and I went in the article, I said, put Kelce on the cover. And I was like, I can't sell Kelce. You just can't. If you have Kelce, you're most likely a contender, and you cannot trade Kelce right now because you're not going to get the value that you deserve, and he's worth more on your team. Yeah, Kelce's probably going to fall off in the next couple of years. He's 35 years old. I mean, he's the same age as Gronk. But he's at the top of his game, and he is so much better than the rest of the position. And this isn't like running back or receiver where there's a whole bunch of good ones. There's not much out there, and supply and demand. Kelce does not move off my roster unless I get a Godfather type of an offer. Agree or disagree? Let's go to the rookies. What was that?
Complete agreement. Can't argue.
Yep.
Let's go to the rookies and get out of here. Biggest bust, again, back to the disagreements. Malik Willis, James Cook, Drake London, Treylon Burks, Isaiah Spiller. We didn't agree on a single one, so I gave the award to Sky Moore. Since we're not agreeing on this, we're just going to go through the whole list of bad. And so in your rookie draft, Sky Moore was a mid to late first-round pick in some drafts, and he was a player that people were excited about even in redrafts. And because of the way the scoring is, he gave you some negative weeks. Like Sky Moore gave you some weeks that were negative. He had 0 targets, 0 catches, a fumbled punt return. And so, I hope you didn't start him. Even in your DFS league, he was just someone you could not count on. Hopefully better things ahead for Sky Moore. Isaiah Spiller was somebody I was excited about, taking him at the beginning of the second round. Didn't do squat. Traylon Burks, he had a couple nice weeks. He got hurt. Then he came back. He had a couple touchdown performances, but Ralph still put him up there. Drake London finished strong. He was someone I was thinking you could buy low on, but he finished it pretty strong with Desmond Ridder. Brad, you put him up here. What are your thoughts on Drake London moving forward?
Yeah, they need a quarterback. I was really hoping. I'm torn because I'm going to say what I want to say, but I also don't wish anybody to lose their job. I was really hoping Arthur Smith was they were going to move on from him, because the way that offense runs and the way they try to call plays, it is not conducive to having Kyle Pitts and Drake London there. It just doesn't work. He just had 9 games where he was less than 10 fantasy points, which is just bad news. Bears, they need an offense that's going to feed him the rock. And we saw a little bit more of that with Desmond Ridder later in the season. So maybe there's a little bit of a changing of the guard when they realize, oh my God, we're out. Let's see what Desmond Ridder can do. Let's throw the ball a little bit more. But I think if they can bring in a veteran quarterback, then maybe they're going to lean on that passing a little bit more. If they go rookie quarterback, they're going to lean on that run game more. So I think it kind of depends on where they go with the quarterback position to see where I think Drake London's going to fall out in rankings for next season.
They finished it with he had 12 targets in week 13, 11 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets. He was a wide receiver 3 or better the last 5 weeks, and he finished as wide receiver 10. So good finish to the season. And, he had 6 catches for 120 yards and no touchdown. But he had 4 touchdowns on the season, which is pretty good. We also had James Cook and Malik Willis. And the fact that Josh Dobbs played the last couple weeks does not bode well for Malik Willis. Anything to add on that, John?
He busted like a remedial math student at a blackjack table. I mean, he looks at times, and I liked Malik Willis coming out of college. I liked his pro day. I liked a lot of the stuff that we saw from him. But there were times where he looked confused and incompetent, and that's not good. And to bring Josh Dobbs in and 3-4 days later say, give it a shot is not good. I know he was more developmental from the get-go, but that might have been set back even a little bit. Like, I'd love to see him progress, but it was pretty bad to watch.
Does the firing of Todd Downey change anything for you around that? Right. So, I know they drafted Malik Willis. They had Todd Downey as the offensive coordinator all season. They did move on from him. If they bring in an offensive coordinator and they, don't draft a quarterback, does that kind of change the perspective on Malik Willis a little bit?
A little bit, but I would still want to see someone that wants to gear an offense around where his strengths are, because he's not Ryan Tannehill. And so you have to implement a different offensive scheme that suits his skill set more so than what Tannehill is. Tannehill with his dink and dunk and, consistent short throws and stuff like that. That's not Malik Willis. He wants to go big or he wants to take off running. You've got a scheme for that.
Yeah, I'm out. I don't have him on any of my teams, but I'd trade him if I could and pretty much give him away for whatever. Best value, Tyler Algier, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyler Algier, Ken Walker. We're thinking more of a redraft perspective with this. Obviously, in your redrafts, Ken Walker was drafted a lot higher. Best value award goes to Tyler Algier. We talked about it earlier. Crazy low draft capital. Really in all your leagues, Superflex. Rookie, 1 quarterback rookie, redraft rookie, and redraft just in general. Tyler Algier was drafted super low, and he was someone that you could really, really count on. I remember getting questions at the end of the year like, Tyler Algier, Saquon Barkley, Tyler Algier, Alvin Kamara, and you should have said Tyler Algier. You should have said Tyler Algier every time. Because he was a stud and he finished the season strong and he won some leagues and he wins the award tonight. My only concern with him is the draft capital. We've seen it with James Robinson. We've seen it with some other players where these guys with late draft capital come in. They look really, really good. They do really well. and then somebody comes in a year or two later and takes their job, and poof, they're gone. The waiver wire winner, Tyler Algier, Ken Walker, Pacheco, Ken Walker. So right back at it with the same guys. Ken Walker is the winner. Ken Walker in my league, my couple redraft leagues, he was dropped when Rashad Penny was killing it and picked back up. In some leagues, he wasn't. He obviously was drafted in a lot of leagues, but in a couple leagues of mine, he was. And some people out there, he wasn't. But I know when he hit the waiver wire in mine, I had to scoop him back up and I had to pay up all my draft capital, all my fab, because he was on the waiver wire when Rashad Penny broke his leg. Thoughts on Ken Walker next year? I have him as a top 5 dynasty running back. Anybody disagree with that or have him a little higher? And
Nope.
the Mr. Consistency Award, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. I was the only Garrett Wilson vote on this ship. Chris Olave is the winner. Anyone want to talk about Chris Olave?
119 targets.
Yeah, I think he was the obvious rookie winner of a veteran player going down. He wasn't as consistent, obviously, the first 3 weeks with Michael Thomas, but he just became a target hog and showed that he can be the wide receiver one in offense. So I think it was impressive what he did, especially when Andy Dalton, who is serviceable, but I don't think anybody would think that Saints offense was high flying, and Chris Olave was fairly consistent all the way through the season.
Yeah, Chris Olave put a lot of people, a lot of people were down on him as the 6th or 7th running back in the class in the pre-draft process. His size, he can't break a tackle, there's no yards after the catch, and then he got drafted super high in the first round, and he drafted a pretty good location, even though the bad quarterback play. And I have him as top 10 dynasty wide receiver for me. I have him right behind Wilson. I'm a big Chris Olave fan. And loved what I saw year 1. All right, well, that's it. Award show's over. We're just over an hour. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Appreciate all you guys. Make sure you give them a follow, subscribe, give us a like, and drop your questions. We'll be here all season with all your Dynasty content. We're going to be doing some rookie evals and some mock drafts coming up. As always, good luck this season.
Cheers.